Alright, let's get into Laura Kate Dale, the one responsible for all that cringe dialogue in Dragon Age, the Veilguard. Despite all the hype from the media trying to paint this as some breakthrough in storytelling, there's no ignoring the giant gap between the critic scores and the actual gamer reviews. It's classic gaming journalism spin where critics are raving, but the people actually playing the game, they're clearly not on board. There's also the fact that the Veilguard saw 300,000 refunds just yesterday, and by the looks of it, that number is only climbing. People aren't even hesitating to get their money back, which tells you everything you need to know about how her writing went down with the fans. The dialogue and forced themes feel miles away from what made Dragon Age such a beloved franchise in the first place. It's honestly baffling to think that BioWare thought this was a good move. This game could have been a huge comeback for them, a chance to win back fans after a series of missteps. I mentioned her in my last video, and honestly, she's been like a magnet for drama in gaming journalism. She's written for Kotaku, Polygon, IGN, and pretty much any outlet that's down to stir things up. And let's be real, even Kotaku, which has its own reputation for pushing boundaries, couldn't stick with her. Now, Dale's whole angle has always been about representation and accessibility in games. Sure, those things matter, but the way she goes about it, it's almost like she's more interested in riling people up than actually making good points. Case in point, her infamous Persona 5 article, where she claimed the game had an ableist slur in the lyrics. Turns out she completely misheard it. The word wasn't offensive at all, it was retort. Kotaku had to backpedal with an apology, but did that make her pause? Nope, she's still out here, doubling down harder than ever. Then came the big reveal. She's actually writing for Dragon Age, the Veilguard. You can imagine the reactions. For years, she's been bashing big studios, then suddenly she's buddy-buddy with BioWare? She even gave a shout-out to Patrick Weeks, a lead writer there. Remember that time she went after an indie game because she didn't like its title? She claimed it was offensive, sparking backlash against the developer, or the gaming event where she accused a comedian of misgendering her. That whole thing blew up in the media, but then people started poking holes in her story. Doesn't stop her, though. She just keeps finding new ways to stir things up. One more thing I want to add more here is how the billionaires' journos are coping with how the release of the game turned out. You've probably come across the Zarmina Khan before, a journalist who writes for PlayStation Lifestyle, and let's just say she's developed a reputation for, well, blindly defending the Veilguard like it's her personal mission. I've read a few of her articles, and it's almost like she's on a crusade to make sure nobody dares to criticize the game, or BioWare for that matter. Every time the Veilguard faces valid criticism, she's there, guns blazing, telling everyone to just shut up and enjoy it. Her recent article was just classic Zarmina, titled Dragon Age, the Veilguard off to a good start amid troll attacks. She called out anyone criticizing the Veilguard as grifters and trolls trying to harm BioWare's breakout success. Like, really? I don't know about you, but labeling fans with legitimate concerns as grifters feels pretty out of touch. I mean, people have invested years into Dragon Age. It's not like everyone out here just wants to hate for the sake of it. They're disappointed with the direction BioWare's taking, and they have every right to speak up. But to Zarmina, if you're not totally on board, you're a chud or an ideologically motivated attacker. She also said that Veilguard currently holds a Metacritic average of 84 over 100 on the PS5. Yeah, because we trust companies more than actual gamers. 2.5 is sure impressive. And here's the kicker. Zarmina posted this article on Twitter and then blocked replies. Talk about irony, right? She's preaching about open-mindedness and inclusivity, but if you disagree with her, she doesn't even want to hear it. Well, you've got to ask yourself why someone who supposedly cares about community and engagement would shut down any conversation that doesn't align with her views. One part that really stood out was how she framed the Veilguard's strong sales as if the game was this massive success while brushing off numbers that clearly show it's struggling. The game had a disappointing peak on Steam, especially compared to other big releases. In its first 24 hours, the Veilguard was barely scraping by in the top 20 on Steam charts. It has fallen off the top 15 played on Steam right now. It's not even on the front page anymore. I mean, we're talking about Dragon Age here. This is a beloved franchise with a huge fan base, but they're sitting around 80,000 peak players just today with a budget speculation of $250 million. That's pretty low compared to other big launches this year like Black Myth, Wukong, or even the Monster Hunter Wilds beta. I saw so many fans who've loved this series for years just shaking their heads at how BioWare dropped the ball. Come on, these two is an indie game and a Japanese game, with the latter releasing the same day as Veilguard. Back to Zarmina. Honestly, reading her articles feels like satire at this point. It's like she's playing for a corporate team and just parroting whatever makes BioWare look good. Yeah, you can support a game, but this isn't journalism. It's corporate PR with a thin activist veneer. And look, I'm all for games evolving and reflecting a wider range of voices. That's important. But if you're going to push a message, you've got to back it up with a solid game. Baldur's Gate 3 showed it can be done, right? That game has a strong narrative, fantastic gameplay, and some inclusive elements, but it doesn't shove them in your face. Instead, it lets the story and gameplay speak for themselves, which is why Baldur's Gate 3 is still thriving months after release. Meanwhile, the Veilguard's numbers are already looking rough, and that's a bad sign for BioWare. In the end, fans aren't buying it, not just the game, but the whole narrative around it. You can't convince people to overlook poor performance with articles telling them they're wrong for wanting more. If the game doesn't deliver where it counts, all the PR spin from people like Zarmina won't save it. So yeah, unless BioWare can turn things around with some serious updates or gameplay improvements, I think we're watching the Veilguard go down as a major disappointment for the franchise.